Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's program. My name is David Matney with Nebraska Realty here in Omaha, Nebraska. Tonight, we're going to be talking about buying raw land. But before we do that, if you can hear me okay, if there's anyone in the chat, if you can hear me okay, just say so in the chat and we'll kick things off here shortly. And tonight, most people think that buying raw land is just like buying a house, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Tonight, we're going to be breaking down exactly what goes into buying raw land. So I'm excited to bring on tonight's guest and MHO. I didn't practice MHO8. I should have practiced tonight, but it's great to see you in the chat. So terrific. You can hear me okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, tonight's guest is Bob Armstrong Bob Osborne. It's been a long day, folks. Bob Osborne from American Land Legacy Company. And we'll bring Bob onto the. Bob, sorry about that.
Dave, you're all good, and I just want to clarify: I did not strong arm you to get onto the podcast here at all.
Well,
So
I
no,
I apologize. I don't know where like. Oh, geez. I'm telling you what, it's been a rough day. Bob, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us how you got into this crazy business. We've known each other for quite some time, so we go a long ways back. But tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested on the land side of the business.
well, I know I stuck with the land part of it after taking your class in real estate, so thoroughly enjoyed it and made it super fun. So to be a part of your live cast here is absolutely amazing. I'm a a 38-year retail warehouse and management executive. Really is my career. So, in my 50s, I made a change, and my change was to do something that I'd always done. And when I was young, it was running a trap line before high school, right?
Yeah,
Hunting, fishing, doing as much as I could outdoors. And when I went into retail management, that took me kind of out of that. So one day
right.
I was just kind of looking out. And I'm like, I want to make a change. And,
Awesome.
my wife was like, why and how come? And after we talked through it, here I am. I'm 4 years into being a land agent. Um, I've taken the 4 years to be a member and part of every agency I could or learning platform that I could to
Hmm.
learn more about the business. So more about ranching, more about farming, additionally
Right.
more about commercial development, transitional land, rec property, which I kind of have a little in for what if it's a rec property, what I'm looking for. But
Okay.
at the end of the day, it's working with clients, trying to offer a little better experience when it comes to the land perspective,
Hmm.
be more of a educational person to them, so anybody can ask me questions regarding that. But
Okay.
really, emphasize my communication, my follow up and follow through, and at the
Hmm.
end of the day, just customer satisfaction is a real big thing to me. To your point, buying land is different than a house. There's usually not a bathroom on the land or a garage or something else like that. So there's some opportunities there, but at the end of the day, it's making sure that we have a seamless interaction, and at the end of the day, the customer finds what they're looking for.
Well, that we had a little conversation offline before we started the program, and you brought up something that I never thought anybody would need as kind of like required equipment, and that would be bolt cutters. Can you talk about that? Why would you need bolt cutters in kind of like your standard equipment?
Well, we'll keep the analogy going between a land agent and a home agent. When a home agent shows up to a house, usually the lockbox will or won't work, and
Right?
or the combination isn't working, and then you call the agent. Within minutes, somebody can be right there and help you, right?
Right.
But with a land agent, it's calling another agent and saying, "Hey, we're going to be on this property," and you get there, and the key's not there, the lock's not undone. You've
Hmm.
just driven an hour and a half with clients to get to this property. You're going to spend
Right.
3 hours on it. They've adjusted their deal. So usually I'll just call the other agent and say, hey, no reason to run out. I'll just cut the chain. And then when you come out, you can refix the bolt on there and do it yourself. Otherwise, we're going in. We're not waiting. So
Right. I mean, because you're covering the entire state.
absolutely, yes.
And so that is, and I don't think, as I'm one of these Omaha folks that, you know, uh, traveling to Lincoln is going is a
Yeah, no,
stretch. You know?
for me, North Platte I'm there by lunch and leave by 6. I'm rolling to North Platte by 10 o'clock in the morning, and I can have a noon meeting with customers.
Right.
Um, what takes me across the whole state is, yes, we have the majority of our Nebraska population in the Omaha-Lincoln area. And
Hmm.
I would say, and I don't have an actual fact, but I would say 80% of the people who live in Omaha or Lincoln have some tie to an agricultural background through their
Right.
family, cousins, uncles, aunts, you name it, there's an
Yeah.
agricultural tie. So a lot of times, for me to go out and meet new clients in a different part of the state usually comes from an acquaintance or a relationship that I potentially would have with agents or
Right.
people in the Omaha Lincoln area. So
Right.
that's why covering the whole state is pretty important, at least in my business.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the program because we get a lot of people that are relocating to Omaha, and some of those folks, are interested in purchasing land and that sort of thing, and I'm sure you run across this a lot where mom and dad are maybe getting out of the farm business and or might have passed away and it's an estate sale, that sort of thing. I'm sure you run across that quite a bit as well. Is that a big part of your business?
That is a big part, and that's that prior planning piece.
Hmm.
You hope that you're at the forefront, and when something does happen, that there is a change that needs to be made on the farmstead.
Hmm.
And typically, what happens there is, not every person knows a land agent or even a
Hmm.
realtor from a house perspective on a first name basis. You may know it through somebody else.
Hmm.
So again, a lot of connections from somebody here that they don't know the local realtor in that town. They want more than a realtor because mom and dad have farm ground or ranch ground or something else.
Right.
So when they hear that somebody says, "Well, do you know there's a land agent?" and people are like, "Well, what do you mean?" And
Hmm.
when they call me, I'm like, "Yeah, 95% of my business is land.
Right.
May it be farms, transitional land, ranches, commercial property that is just land." That's the space that I live in. So it's nice to be able to have a conversation with the kids because a lot of time your elderly parents, my mom was the same way,
Hmm.
rely a son or a daughter in the family to help with decisions on what's going to happen with the property.
Right.
Um, ultimately, it's probably going to fall into the kids' hands, but at the end of the day, mom and dad still need a good space, and they want to know and trust somebody. So when the kids don't know anybody local, doesn't seem
Hmm.
like maybe the local agent has quite the reach, then
Right.
they reach out to somebody like myself that's an agent that covers the whole state and then is versed in different avenues that can help the family with whatever they may need.
Because there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that somebody take for somebody like myself. There's I don't even know what I don't know about purchasing that type of ground, and that's why I think it's just even though I'm licensed in the state of Nebraska, I don't even know the first thing what goes into farm ground or rec ground and that sort of thing because there's a lot of things that people aren't uh, thinking about when um, they're making that kind of purchase. Um, Bob, I want to ask you what kind of going into our first question here. What's the very first thing someone should do before buying raw land?
First of all, really get pre-approved.
Yep.
So you're into the same thing with the house, and again, I'll try to keep making these analogies, but in today's day and age, and even back when it was COVID and houses were like pancakes, I mean, you couldn't keep them on the griddle fat, they're gone.
Right. Yeah.
Um, you need to be pre-approved. You need to understand what programs are out there. So is that an FSA program? Is that a Rural First program?
Okay.
Maybe in some cases, if there's an area you would like to be in, maybe you've met or are meeting with the local bank in that area that has
Okay.
done farm or ag or recreational lending. I'm always out having conversations with lenders and have a hit list, really a small people, again, just that have done loans for me before with customers.
Gotcha.
I have no affiliations or connections with these people,
Okay.
except that they are versed in this type of transaction. So again, that prior planning, getting the purchaser out there first,
Hmm.
getting them to talk to the lender, get all their ducks in a row with what they're looking to do, is probably the first thing.
Okay.
Um, the second thing is to be on the same page. So if you're a husband and wife,
Hmm.
get on the same page, establish a budget, understand what the property is going to be used for. In some cases, it's just going to be a strictly hunting property, but
Hmm.
they have young kids and they want the kids to be able to go out and enjoy it too, doing different things.
Gotcha.
So does that make sense for them? And a lot of times, especially if it's a hunting property, this is a property that's going to be a generational property.
Okay.
Um, so understand the highs and lows. I think one comment we made beforehand too, that land, it isn't cheap,
Hmm.
but it is an investment, and it is an investment that usually returns itself at the end of its life. So whenever you do want to sell it, depending on the improvements you make, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get your money back out of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Got a chat here. It says MH08 says recently subbed to a channel that focuses on land, learn stuff I never even thought of, as well as how to identify and remedy issues. And that's true. And then he says Arnold, Nebraska. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. And then Clark has a question. Clark's in the house. Welcome, Clark. What are some of the differences between developed and undeveloped land?
So, Clark, that is a great question. How I really focus on that or help people through that. And when it comes to developed or developable land that could
Okay.
be developed, it's the close proximity to a major city or city limits. So it doesn't have to be a major city. It could be Arnold, Nebraska, if we need to be. But
All right.
again, if the city and or the county has identified areas within an area that is going to be up for development. So again, may it be something for manufacturing, something for housing, something for commercial use of some kind. Anything like that is what I call a developed or developable land.
Okay.
Undeveloped land, I really kind of throw that into the farm ranch type thing and your
Hmm.
recreational properties. So it produces, it has a purpose. So maybe cattle grazing on it, or it's get row crop, or it's got some recreational. But it's not developed in the purpose of that it has a well, a septic, a building, or is it going to be close enough to a city or city limits that it's going to be used for more of an everyday use that people are used to.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Hey, and we got South Loop River Homestead. Hey, Hey, MH08. I'm in Custer County, also a small world. All right, terrific. Well, thanks, South Loop, for joining us. All right.
Well,
Um,
yeah. Hey, South Loop Homestead, my second office,
okay.
and most of the time, my primary office is in Burwell, Nebraska.
Is that
So
right?
I'm located just north of you there. I am just into Valley County, so Garfield or excuse me, Loop County. I'm just into Loop County, right there on the Calamus Reservoir.
Okay.
It is what I call my north central office. And the reason is because of the amount of ranch and farm clients that I have, not only in north central Nebraska, but northwestern Nebraska. So um,
Gotcha.
it's a great place. So Custer County, beautiful county, a lot of good ground there, everything from the grazing ground for the cattle to the pivots that are in that county. So
Is that right?
hello, South Loop.
Well, I think that's another thing that people, we don't, somebody from Omaha doesn't, or sometimes when you travel I-80, that's not Nebraska. Nebraska is a beautiful state once you get off I-80. You know what I'm saying? There's really some beautiful parts of the state that people just don't appreciate, and I think it gets overlooked. Can you anything to add with that, Bob?
Dave, I would 100% agree with what you've got there. Nebraska, so let's just talk about the Sandhills. The
Hmm.
Sandhills is what I call a simple beauty. They go on for miles and miles and miles, hundreds upon thousands of acres of just rolling terrain. You know what
Yep.
I think about sometimes? I used to tell my kids when we would travel,
Yeah.
could you imagine being in a covered wagon going 15 miles over terrain that you don't know what's going to be around the next corner? So when you're
Yes.
out when you're out there, the prairie has different stages. Like right now, the stages are when a lot of the grasses are turning colors.
Hmm.
2 weeks ago, you would have seen miles and miles of sunflowers. Because of
Okay.
the good rain, we've had good rain this year, the prairie
Yeah.
grasses are up. But now the grasses are kind of getting into a fall look. So as you look across the prairie, there's more of a purple and a pink hue to the ground.
Yeah.
So as the
Wow.
wind blows, it's just a different type of, it looks like
Wow.
almost an ocean running across there.
Yeah, that's
But then
awesome.
again, you can go up to, let's just go up to an area like Long Pine.
Right.
You're heading up towards Valentine, you come across the little town of 300, the Long Pine. You're going to go from flat hay type ground to an area that you think you're in Rapid City, South Dakota. I
Right.
mean, nice houses, pine trees, everything else. You're in that little ecosystem for about 3 miles. You pop
Right.
out, you're back into the prairie. Then you
Yeah.
head a little bit south towards Bridgeport, which is kind of the North Platte River through there.
Yeah.
There's kind of big, deep canyons that run through there. And the
Wow.
amount of beets that get harvested from
Huh.
that area out there, that's where the sugar beet plants are. I mean,
Okay.
that's another big thing. Everybody thinks Nebraska is just corn and soybeans, but the
Right.
beets, the sorghum, the
Yeah.
cattle, and let alone, let's go down to southeast Nebraska, the timber down by Nebraska City, the large bluffs that
Right.
overlook the Missouri River. And there is just a lot of beautiful ground in the state of
That's
Nebraska.
awesome.
And if you haven't enjoyed it, you should get out and do it.
Yeah, no, that 100%. My son was in scouts and we went and did a canoe trip a few years back down the Niobrara, and that was my first time doing that, and that was amazing how beautiful that country is, and I was shocked because all the waterfalls and everything like that. It really,
Right.
if anybody hasn't had the opportunity to do that, they should really take that time because it really was incredible. Yeah. MH08 says, I actually live in Denver at South Loop Homestead. I pass through Arnold a few times a year visiting family in South Dakota. Crossed the South Loop many times. All right. And then he says Niobrara country. And then South Loop says, lived in Omaha for 30 years. When moving to central Nebraska, we like Burwell and Callaway, the best choice to live on the river. All right. Excellent. All right. And then Son of Joxer says, I lived in Omaha for almost 30 years. I've never been any further west than Lincoln. Always meant to go see Car Hinge, but it's about a 7-hour drive. Yeah.
It is, but as you go, I'm going to tell you, if you travel the state, there's one thing you're not going to get. One's a bad meal. You're talking home cooking across the state, everything from breakfast, lunch to dinner. And you know what? When you get a steak at a steakhouse in a small town, maybe Callaway or Arnold or someplace like that, oh my gosh, it is great. You know what I mean? Um, and then your hospitality today with VRBO and Airbnb, let
Right,
alone the small little, you and I talked about it, that my best motel is where I can park the truck right out front, right outside the front door, right? I
right.
get out of the
Yep,
truck, I walk in, open the door, there I am, right?
yep.
Those people are so happy to see you and will just talk your ear off. And if you're not careful, they're inviting you for dinner. But it's worth the trip. I
Yep,
mean, I think the other cool thing, I remember this when my kids had their cell phones, right? And
right.
they cell phones were just kind of becoming the thing. And I would take them up to Long Pine in that area to go tubing and stuff like you did on the
Yeah.
Maverick. Be driving, right? I'd look up in the rearview mirror and see them all staring at their phone and looking at each other and then looking out the window and looking at each other and looking at the phone. We don't have service. So to get family time back in those type of areas is awesome.
Yeah. You know, I was, when he was in scouts and we went, down the, and, when you're in real estate, cell service is really important. You'd have to, I'd have to make a little getaway and travel a little bit to get to higher ground.
Yeah, you're climbing a tree. You're going up the side of a mountain. And you're like, you got your phone up in the air.
That is, and then South Loop River Homestead says no cell service at our place. All right. Well, Bob, what about when you're buying a house, there's the home inspection process. What about on a raw land purchase? What are some of the inspections or some things that people may not think about that they need to be aware of in terms of due diligence, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So I'm going to circle back. There's a fair amount of this responsibility that falls on the land agent or your agent,
Hmm.
and there's a fair amount of responsibility that falls on you, the buyer and or the seller also. And I'll talk both ways. One of the main things that I look at and think is extremely important is the actual land itself, the survey, right?
Okay.
So when I go out to the county assessor's page, I go out and pull down the information, which every Nebraska a person that wants to look at a parcel, you can go out and get that information. It's all public information.
Hmm.
I'm looking to see what the county has recorded as acres for that property.
Okay.
So then from there, I'm going to look at potentially some other programs that I use. Um,
Okay.
that help to do CMAs and to help me with some pricing analysis. And I see what they have listed as acres. And then what
Okay.
I'll do is I go to another mapping site and I look at a map and I look at that parcel also. So now
Okay.
you would think we're talking about the same piece of ground.
Right.
Times when you're looking at three different programs, there are three different distinct areas that don't match. So as a
Oh.
land agent, prior to getting out there, especially if I'm working with a buyer, is for
Hmm.
my responsibilities to get out there before I take a buyer out there and research those areas. Maybe
Gotcha.
there's a tree line and that fence is on the other side of that tree line and they just moved the fence because they didn't want to cut down the trees. Well,
Okay.
that's quite not right. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or maybe a property was surveyed and all the survey sticks looks pretty convenient. Let's just put it that way. But
Right.
as I'm looking at my mobile app that tells me exactly where it is, I walk
Okay.
right by that stick, and that mobile app says the property line's 15 feet away from me yet. So I
Is
still
that
go
right?
farther and I mark it.
Okay.
So as I'm out on that property, if I feel that there are some discrepancies, road easement discrepancies, maybe an
Hmm.
easement getting to another property, I try to identify those first of all. And again, if it gets to a point that we can't really get a clear answer from the seller or from another agent or whatever else, part of our purchase agreement will be that we want the property surveyed.
Gotcha.
Flip the channel and say now that I'm working for the seller. And a lot
Hmm.
of times I'll tell the seller that, hey, depending on the property, couple things I see here, let's just have a surveyor come out and just verify a couple things. And
Got
you're
it.
going to be, my seller might be, Bob, that fence line's been in the same damn place for the last 31 years. Da, 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 da. It's like, George, I get that. But the
Right.
guy that's on the other side of the property over here is a major landowner.
Hmm.
And for him to throw up a stink when this property gets sold and maybe come after a buyer and say that fence is wrong, even though he's allowed it, yeah, I'd rather get some clarity to that first
Gotcha.
versus having that come to the backside. So having a survey is a big piece.
Okay.
Um, Another big piece is typically in the land transaction, there doesn't have to be a property disclosure.
Hmm.
Um, and that can go both ways. Here's where I'm at.
Okay.
I go around the property and I look real hard for what I find new ground, disturbed ground, recently trimmed ground, trees, whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
ask as many questions as I can. One, if I'm listing the property, I'm usually have the owner with me, and we're talking
Okay.
about what we see. And in some cases, then if I'm out there before I bring out a buyer, then I'm going back to the other agent or seller and saying, hey, what's with this area? It looks like there's a bunch of new dirt down in this
Right.
ravine. And it could
Okay.
be that, oh, we had some old cars and what have you back in there that my Uncle George and blah, and we just decided to cover it up to make it look better.
Ah,
Well, not saying that that's a bad thing, but I'm
right.
probably going to have you fill out a property disclosure for me.
Right.
Um, another thing to think about if you're buying some farm ground and it's got a pivot on it, right? So what
Mm-hmm.
irrigates the ground? Well, that has to have a motor of some kind to run that pivot. If I
Okay.
get to a
Yep.
pivot and it's spotless around that pivot, it
Right.
looks like it's recently cleaned up. I just simply ask the question, did we have a problem out here? Did we have an oil spill? Did we have
Right.
anything? Because I need to find that out. And if someone says, yeah, but we cleaned it up, I'm like, well, you all right with us doing a soil test? Because the
Gotcha.
last thing you want to do is sell it. You thought you cleaned it all up and you didn't, and now the buyer is going to come back on you because there's some soil contaminated soil somewhere.
Gotcha.
I mean,
Okay.
so there's a lot of little things from one, the survey, then looking at the property disclosure to make sure that the property looks clean.
Mm-hmm.
Um, fencing, looking at fencing, evaluating the ground in regards to how much timber's on it versus if it's out of control or in control. So
Okay.
there's a lot of little things, but the survey and the property disclosures, a couple of things. Am I doing property disclosures all the time? Absolutely not. Usually
Okay.
just when my gut's kind of telling me and I'm looking at some things, I'm like, I don't know what went on there. So
Gotcha. Okay. MH08 says water rights. Talk about, yeah, what about water and wells and some of that sort of thing? What are some of the things that I'm not even aware of that you need to be cognizant of when you're buying a
yeah, so
farm ground or
depending on what you're going to use the ground. So typically, if you're going to be using it from a farming perspective,
okay.
and it has water on it, or there
Hmm.
isn't any water, but you potentially want to put water on there, we'll go ahead and start working together to try to find out, is there water available? Is there enough water available if you want to do something? But water rights is a really, really big deal.
Okay.
There are parcels of ground that may not have water on it,
Hmm.
even though around it, it has water. So in some cases, you can have water rights that transfer to another property that they're actually taking water from property A to feed property B. So
Okay.
that's where they're buying and selling some of the water rights on that. In a
Gotcha.
lot of cases, when I'm selling, at least most of the property I've sold in, the water rights, the mineral rights, and the air rights have all transferred with the property.
Okay.
But the farther west you go, you start getting into some counties where there's some oil wells. You might have a person that maybe they've never punched a hole for an oil well at all, ever,
Right.
right?
Okay.
But they want to sell the property and they're going to sell it with the oil, or excuse me, with the water and wind rights, but not the mineral slash oil.
Okay.
The buyer just has to make a decision if that is something they do or don't want to go with, or is there a price associated with some of that stuff? Because it
Gotcha.
could be for whatever reason, someone decides to punch a well in somewhere and find out that, hey, there is an oil reserve in that area.
Right.
Um, you go from there. One of the big things in this part of that, when we start talking about all these things, I don't
Hmm.
have all the answers. So what
Gotcha.
I typically do is get with the local FSA office. I'll
Okay.
get with maybe some other agents within our organization,
Okay.
or I get with an agent through RLI. So RLI is the Retailer Land Institute.
Okay.
It's an organization that has members across all 50 states in the United States,
Hmm.
and we're all land agents,
Okay.
male and female of both. But one
Yep.
of the big things that we do, we work hand in hand with each other. So as you start making connections, I can pick up and call a guy in Colorado. I can call a guy
Okay.
in Wyoming. I can call a guy here. What have you run into? A lot of times I'm asking for the pitfalls. what to watch out for, because everybody has a different story.
Right.
And if I can gather as much information as I can and then try to go back and do my final research, then I'm
Hmm.
at the end trying to help that buyer and seller with this also. But
Gotcha.
that some of that responsibility does lay on the buyer and seller
Hmm.
also, because there's an interpretation in some areas that, again, I don't want to be the person interpreting it. I'm giving you the facts of what I
Right.
see. So,
Then they can make their decision. Yeah. No,
correct.
that's um and then Clark says, what about a talk about a perk test. What exactly is it? How long does it take? Um uh,
Absolutely. That's a great question. Let me just kind of talk about that a little bit. If you go, and I can't get the right county, but south of Lancaster County, outside of Lincoln,
okay.
a perk test is where you put in a septic tank, and what
Hmm.
they're going to do, they will calculate the amount of time it takes water to seep into the ground to
Okay.
maintain like a filtration system for your septic. So your septic would be your own personal sewer.
Right.
With that being said, you have to maintain it. You need to
Hmm.
make sure you're watching what goes in there. You don't want to be throwing a bunch of garbage in there because it has to decompose, break down, and then when the water level gets high enough, it goes out into what's called laterals. So
Hmm.
these are pipes that go off that septic tank, and then when it's out there, it needs to then seep into the ground.
Gotcha.
If the perk test isn't good, meaning depending on the rate that it needs to dissipate into the ground, they may not allow you to put a septic in there, or you may have
Okay.
to have longer than normal lateral lines because it's going to take more space for water to dissipate. And in some
Gotcha.
cases, it just won't. So, I, again, can't remember the county south of Lincoln there. You'll run into a lot of properties that have lagoons. So a
Okay.
lagoon is the old way where that is coming into a tank and then it's running out away from the house. There's a lagoon that's set out there and
Right.
it becomes a natural part of the ecosystem that it breaks down waste and everything else from there. Some people are
Gotcha.
good with it because they've grown up with it. Some people
Right.
are like, not on my watch, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so, the perk test especially if you're
Okay.
building a house, that's part of the, hey, do you have water? Can a septic system be supported in this area? You know what I mean? Those are two important pieces that, again, your land agent can help you with people in that area. So maybe the county or wherever to get that figured out for you.
Gotcha. All right. And Clark, hey, everybody hit the like button. All right, terrific. Thank you, Clark. I appreciate that. All right. And then MH08 says leach field.
Correct. So
Exactly.
your leach field is where your tubing and stuff goes out through there from your septic.
Gotcha. And what about, you have a well on a property and you have a septic system on a property. Is there any danger or any thought process on um when you have that sort of thing, is there any concern about, hey, that seeping into the well? I'm talking about, I'm a city person, so I don't, I don't even
No,
know what I
no,
don't know. Is that a
great
concern for
question.
folks?
It is. It's a great question. There is rules and regulations by county, and then by the state that designate how far the well needs to be from the septic. So you
Gotcha.
need to have that separation from those two things. Typically,
Okay.
what you have though on your well, if you have your septic field, let's say it's under the ground 6 or 8 feet, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? At
Yep.
the end of the day, your well typically is deeper than 6 or 8 feet. So it's
Gotcha.
hundreds of feet deep with a
Okay,
water
so there's a
raised.
big,
So
yeah, okay.
there's a big gap in there. So again, what you're looking for is that separation on the property so we don't have anything that could potentially get where what's called the casing that runs down for the well, where anything could
Okay.
leach down along that casing. So the farther you keep it
Gotcha.
apart, the better you are, better off you
Okay.
are there.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, how had neighbors with the septic system every couple of years it was pumping day where they'd pump the tank into a cornfield.
No comment.
Like,
Pumping your septic tank every 2 or 3 years, depending on the amount of use, just good maintenance, right?
yep,
You
yep,
spend $300, they come out, they pump it all out in case anything got
right,
in there, it's good to go. I do that on my property up in Burwell. Every
yep,
3rd year, they just come out and pump it. I know there's really no reason to, but guess what? I don't have any maintenance, but pumping it and then putting it out, I just can't comment.
yeah,
Not something doesn't make sense to me.
Right. No, what mistakes do first-time land buyers make right out of the gate, or something that a common mistake that you see first-time land owners or first-time land buyers make?
That they buy this property and they think they can do whatever they want.
Okay.
So, understanding what you're buying,
Mhm.
understanding why you're buying it, and then understanding the county regulations once you do buy it.
Right.
Also understanding your neighbors or close proximity that your neighbors are. You might buy a super nice piece of property, right? But
Mhm.
you have houses within a half mile.
Okay.
That's close. That's close. And you want to use it as a shooting range. How are you shooting? Where are you shooting? When are you shooting? There shouldn't be too many things on there, but your neighbors might not feel too good about that unless you've really done it right or
Right.
something else like that. You may buy a property and all of a sudden want to start raising chickens, goats, yaks. I don't know,
Okay.
whatever you want. And there
Yeah.
might be something that says, we can't in this area for whatever reason, right?
Gotcha.
Um, so there's little things like that probably come up that you need to just understand what you can and can't do on that property. But again, getting with a good land agent, somebody that's going to just help you. This is an interview process, and I highly recommend this. When you get with somebody or somebody recommends, don't be afraid to interview another agent. So back to our analogy
Great
with the
point.
home agent,
Yep.
interview when you're buying a house, interview 3 or 4 agents.
Right.
It's our job to come talk to you. We have to, my wife says you always have to sell yourself twice. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I want people to feel comfortable with me, who I am, what I'm doing.
Yep.
After you interview 2 or 3 people, you come up with the same 5 or 6 questions you want to ask. You want people to kind of elaborate. You want to look at their portfolio of business. If you're buying a $150,000 home, how many times you're out there interviewing agents that only sell $1 million homes?
Right. Right.
You're probably not. So you want to find agents that one are diversified, that fit your niche, understand where you're going. So from a house perspective, who's the agent in this area that does the best, and maybe you
Right.
interview 2 or 3 and find one that meets up with with what your qualifications are for a person.
Excellent, excellent. All right, MH08 says 50 to 60 years ago. Okay. And then Clark says, geez, not a cornfield had how much. Not, not, that's not good, just nasty. Okay. And he says, it was a farm on the edge of town, middle of nowhere. Okay. So
Well, did the corn come out bicolor then?
town had less than 150 people. We all did, all knew everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody knew everybody. All right. Um, what in terms of, let's see here, what are the biggest red flags that should make a buyer walk away from a land deal? We've kind of touched a little bit on this earlier, but
Yeah, a couple things. Responsiveness of the seller.
okay.
Being able to get the answers that you want in a timely manner. Um, Willing to provide documentation to support what's being said. So,
Ah,
those are from a buyer's perspective. And
right.
so, say you're working with me, and we're looking at a property, and there's another agent, and I start asking questions of that agent, and at first the response is within a couple of hours, and then we
Hmm.
start asking some more questions, and then it becomes a half a day. And then
Right.
we start asking some more questions, and they're just like, well, just include that in your offer. I mean,
Right.
there are things that basically don't provide what I call a two-way street in communication.
Gotcha.
At the end of the day, a land agent, no different than a home real estate agent, our job is to do right by the customer and
Right.
complete a transaction. That's
Yep.
what we're doing. We're here to protect them. We're here to represent them, and at the end of the day, get them as much information they want. So really, there's a time that came up to me that we I had some clients. We were looking at a pretty sizable property. We were walking around the property, and there was a lot of equipment left on the property.
Hmm.
And so my question was, well, what stays on the property? And the agent told me, well, whatever you want, just write it in the contract.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. So my clients left, and I started going around taking pictures of every
Right.
piece of equipment that was there. So I didn't forget anything. And the agent
Right.
asked me, what are you doing? And I'm like, taking a picture of every piece of equipment. He goes, well, I can't believe you're going to ask for every piece of equipment. And I'm
Right.
like, well, I can't believe you didn't have a defined list of what the
Right.
seller was willing to sell with this property and what he was willing not to sell.
Right.
You gave me an open book. I'm taking the open book. I'm
Gotcha.
just all I'm doing is trying to protect my client, the buyer, right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
he was standing there when I asked the question of the agent. He interpreted the same way I did. Every
Right.
single piece of equipment's going. Well, it comes
Right.
up that
Yeah.
80% of it wasn't going to stay.
Exactly.
So then I
Yep.
called that agent and I just like, come on, man, let's work on this. And he's like,
Right.
that is what that's a big red flag. The
Yeah.
communication piece should be no different than anything else that you're comfortable with. When you ask a question, you should be able to get a clear answer to the question, and it should
Right.
make sense to you. So
Yeah. MHOH says if your neighbor's pumping septic into a cornfield, that's a red
that's a big red flag.
flag. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Talk about financing. Touch a little bit about that. How do most people finance land purchases? What when, or like when a traditional um, mortgage isn't an option. Is there anything in terms of financing wise? What do you see in something like
y-
that?
it's going to be the same that you're going to find in a lot of the traditional mortgage. They're going to run a credit check. You're going to need to have 20% down.
Okay.
Um, your time of how long you're going to own the land is going to be the same. One of the big differences is, Dave, though, if you're buying a property from a recreational purpose for your own,
Hmm.
right, it may not generate any income for you.
Okay.
So there, it's just a matter of that you're going to be able to make that roll. You're going to make payments. You're going to make sure it stays qualified as ag, so you get lower taxes on it.
Right.
You may be able to run it and have a CRP program, which you can apply for. So that's a conservation reserve program you may be able to apply for.
Okay.
Um, but remember, if you're buying a piece of property, especially farm ground,
Hmm.
that becomes a business.
Right.
Because if you're not farming it, and you're going to get a tenant that's no different than a house. You're going to
Okay.
get a renter. So you need to interview tenants. You need to know and work with your land agent in regards to what is good cash rent. You need to
Gotcha.
then have your agent work with you to find a good land attorney, somebody that puts together these type of agreements to
Okay.
understand who's paying for the fence, who's paying for fertilizer, um, who's paying for irrigation maintenance if that has irrigation on it. This
Okay.
all needs to be spelled out up
Right.
front
Okay.
um, before you come up with the lease or the cash rent terms on that. So again, like having a house, you can have good land tenants and you can have a bad land tenant. It's
Yeah.
key, no different than the house, that you go by and drive by and make sure if they're supposed to mow the grass, that the grass is mowed. Well, you
Right.
drive by your field, and if they're supposed to make sure the fence is upkept, and make sure the road ditches are mowed, whatever
Hmm.
else you guys have agreed on, you got to drive by that and make sure that that's done.
Gotcha.
Um, but then with that, there are additional programs as you own farm ground, either in a passive manner or actually do it yourself,
Hmm.
that can come through, like soil nutrient programs. Like I said, the conservation easement programs, a wetlands easement program. I mean, there's a lot of different programs that are out there. But again,
Gotcha.
you'll have to just understand the balance sheet of owning a farm, where your
Okay.
depreciation comes into, that kind of stuff.
Excellent. All right. And then Eric Wilkins, how common is it to buy a smaller piece of land from a farmer to build a home around the outskirts of a larger town like Omaha? Great question.
It's getting harder and harder. Um, it really depends on the parcel.
Hmm.
Um, that's where connections, that's where understanding an agent that has a lot of connections or understanding an area
Okay.
is very important. Um, if the parcel lays out that a farmer would or is willing to divest of a little area,
Mhm.
great. What you usually have to look at is access. How is that person going to get back there? Is there a road? Will the
Right.
farmer grant an easement to it? That kind of stuff. The
Gotcha.
amount of people that are looking for a 3 or 5 acre parcel within 30 minutes of Omaha, Lincoln, proper, Blair, any place are hundreds.
Yes.
And
And
the amount of time, the amount of people offering up is very, very small. I mean, a lot of times
right.
those get gobbled up and don't even hit the market. It's because, hey, Jerry's got an uncle, uncle's looking for, there, that's kind of how that transition goes. And
Right.
then they call a land agent like myself and just say, hey, can you help us work us through that? Bingo, that's done. But that transaction
Gotcha.
is already done. Um,
Okay. Okay. But they're
yeah,
paying a big chunk of change for those little tiny chunks
they
of
are.
ground.
They
Yeah,
are.
that's.
Yeah.
I mean, you start driving out and you see, um, you drive out. What's amazing to me is to see all the growth outside of Omaha. It used to be back in the day. You drove out to Gretna. I mean, Vallis Pumpkin Patch is now almost in a subdivision. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's-
Exactly. And the other
and
thing that you're getting now from a tax perspective by these cities, by the time they're putting in sewer and streets and everything else, you'll
right.
find, and this isn't a bad thing, it's just business. There are a lot of cities and communities right now that are not allowing acreage developments.
Oh,
So even
really?
though a builder could go out and buy, let's say, an 80-acre parcel and it lays out beautifully for 3 acre little house home sites, and you can get
Right.
wells and we can put in septics and we can do everything else. The city, if it's very close to the zoning ordinance of a city, they're not allowing that because the tax density is not the
Ah,
same. So
yeah.
it doesn't support paying for the sewer, the water, the improvements to the roads, everything else, and they're just not approving them. So
Gotcha.
that close proximity is getting to be farther and farther away. Even I think you even finding a little bit that way with Springfield because of the county that it's in. But
Right.
Louisville is maybe your next closest place that could potentially do something. But there's
Right.
not a lot of flat ground in Louisville.
Right.
So, not that everything needs to be flat, but sometimes the contours just aren't it's cost prohibitive to try to do a division or an acreage development. So,
And I imagine bringing electricity to a place, that's gotta be a challenge as well, isn't it?
not too bad these days. You still have a lot of roads down the farm where there's homesteads, right? So there's
Okay.
power available. From a
Okay.
utility standpoint, that is one thing that the state of Nebraska is pretty heavy into is, hey, we don't know if we have enough power to sustain the growth that's going on, and they're working on it. But in nine
Okay.
times out of 10, there is power available. One things
Gotcha.
you have to be concerned about it as you get in some of these rural communities, they might have rural water. So,
Okay.
for instance, where we talked about wells, maybe not everybody understands a well or thinks that's a cool thing. I grew up on a well,
Right.
I don't think twice about it. And now
Right.
with reverse osmosis systems and everything else, it's fine. But
Right.
somebody may want to buy this property because it's got county water running right in front of it.
Ah,
Well, even though the county has put in a well system to support a lot of the houses in that county with a water
right.
system, doesn't
Right.
mean they're letting anybody else attach to the system
Ah,
because they don't have the volume.
right.
So
Okay.
it might run right by the front of the property, but the county, the water municipality is saying, sorry, we can't allow you to hook up.
And that's why that due diligence and hooking up with somebody that knows the questions to ask is so important, right?
Well, yeah, and that's I think back to your point. I want to start this process today for next spring. This is us getting together, understanding who we are. I
Yep.
understand what you're looking for. I start putting you on some sites where we're looking at stuff. We go out
Mhm.
and start visiting process, but we're not on a tight schedule.
Right.
We have time. You're out getting your pre-approval done. A lot of times you get a pre-approval for something that's good for 3 to 4 months, as long as you don't go out and, buy a new truck or do anything else like that, you're good to go,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you're putting all that together, but we're stepping into this easy. And then what happens as we start to see something that we're interested in, then we're a little bit quicker into it. But that's next spring's conversation, and a
Gotcha.
lot of it has to hinge on, where our interest rates today, what's going on, and we might be 3 months into this, and the family has a life changing event, and now this buying the separate property or a different properties off the board. That's okay.
Right.
But you know what? Hopefully you've gained a little education through the process that when you are ready to get back into that game again, then you're good to go.
Yep. Yep. And this is your the American Legacy Land Company website where people can go if they and then if they want to contact you. Let me pull up your information there. They can just reach out via cell to get a hold of you. Correct?
Correct. A good
All right.
land agent will answer his phone, and if they don't, they'll call you back within a half hour.
Yeah. No, that
If
is.
I'm gonna be out of an area that's gonna be bad cell coverage, I change my voicemail. I'm flat
Is that
out
right?
telling people that, "Hey, I am going to be located in north central Nebraska, and I'm gonna be what they call at the end of a mail route." That
Okay.
means that's the last house that gets mail, right? And that, I'm probably not gonna have cell service. Please leave a message. Please email me. I will return the call, at the
Gotcha.
end of the day or as soon as I get back into cell service, but I let people know that. I mean, like you want to get something done, you make a phone call, and an
Right.
hour later, you're tapping your finger, going like, "Well, are they going to call me back or not, or what's
Oh,
going on?"
yeah,
I
that
try to be as
is
transparent as I can on that piece of it to just let people know that, hey, I'm going to be out of the area.
right.
So
Yeah, that I mean, yeah, don't get me started there. Don't get me started there. Okay, let's see here. South Loop Homestead says, from what I've seen, land interest rates are higher than homes. Most banks give shorter terms. Farm Credit Service of America will give full length mortgage.
correct.
Okay.
I am out interviewing more and more local banks, um, and then some other lenders. Excuse me, like some lenders that kind of shop the whole mortgage board. Um, Lenders need business. And if there aren't the houses selling like there used to be and this and that, they're looking for alternative avenues. So there, over the last 6 months, has been a lot of education going on in that lending space for
Okay.
lenders looking to diversify their portfolios. I mean,
Gotcha.
if you've got a person that's going to go out and buy a 350 or $400,000 piece of property just to go deer and duck hunting, they typically are qualified to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
That
so if they don't get in that game, they miss out on that. So that's where you get
right.
your farm credit services or your rural first. They're kind of in that game. They
Okay.
understand. They'll look at the portfolio of assets that people have. And again, if we're buying it at the right price, then they're willing to lean in with that.
Gotcha. Now, during the pandemic, we had the craziness of the pandemic, with house prices and everything that did you experience and see the same thing on the land side?
Absolutely. I'll just say I had a development we did up by Calamus Reservoir. We
Okay.
switched it off into 10, or excuse me, 5 acre parcels. We had
Right.
eight 5 acre parcels. Because of the rural development and the internet, there was the bill that everybody should have internet, right? Or it needs to
Yep.
have internet. There
Yep.
was internet availability, high-speed fiber optic in that area. We
Right.
put these lots up for sale, and 10 days later, sold.
Wow.
And they
Wow.
were they were between 100 and $125,000 each.
Wow.
So the comment I asked every person, what brings you out here? One, we want to get away. We want to have a place to get away. Two, I have a 3-day work week. Or three, I can work remotely now.
Yep.
There was a whole bunch of things in the whole COVID piece that really shifted. And, I've
Yep.
got 2 or 3 really good friends now up in that area that have built homes that live up there. The one guy works for a company out of Lincoln, right? But
Mhm.
he's 100% remote. He has to
Right.
go back to Lincoln every other week for a couple days just for some meetings. Other than
Yep.
that, because his internet's good to go, he's there, and he's like he says, when I shut off, I can have a water or I can have a line in the water within 30 minutes and do some
Wow.
fishing at night.
Wow,
So
that's
there's
nice.
a lot of
Yeah,
things. Now his wife had to adjust not being able to run down to the clothing store on a regular basis, but
sure. Yeah.
they were somewhat simple people. So, an hour and a half drive to Grand Island or Kearney
Right.
now is something they've worked into their MO. But otherwise, they absolutely love it there. Peace, quiet, serenity, and the
Yeah,
stars.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. And then let's see. Um, MHO8 says, not to mention the quality of the well water. Some water will clean you out.
I think Hank, my administrative assistant, which is a chocolate lab,
Yeah.
absolutely knows if I don't put well water. So I've got 4 or 5 gallons of water that I'll put in the back of my truck. I fill up at the well out there in Burwell.
Yep.
I'm with you. It's some of the cleanest, freshest, coolest water there is. We'll get to town, and if I'm not using filtered water in his dish, he'll go down there to get a drink and look up at me like, what is this? What's this?
Awesome.
So so MH08, I couldn't agree more. That Sand Hills, the Ogallala Aquifer pumps out some of the best water there is in the world.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And then Eric says, "Thanks for the answer, guys. Great information." And then let's see, MOH says, "Found a house on G Maps. That area they pumped into is showing gray, surrounded by green. Have a hunch that was wasteland to begin with."
Yeah, with mapping today, Google Maps, all the different stuff, I spend a lot of time looking at, especially when you can go back to have the 3, 4, 5 year models where you
Hmm.
can really look at how a piece of ground is transitioned, maybe vegetation growth or anything else. You'd be surprised what you uncover sometime,
Right.
and you go, "Wow, what was that?" So,
Gotcha.
technology is good in that piece of it.
Now speaking of technology, how has AI affected you as a land agent? What's some of the uses that you see or how you incorporate that into your business?
Absolutely. So I take AI, and not only do I Google search something,
Mhm.
then I'll go back to Chat GPT and ask it some information. And then
Right.
I'll go back to some of the programs that I use in the land space in for my marketing, right? And
Okay.
what I'm doing, I'm cross-checking all those to see what I come up with. Your Chat GPT AI is the newest, best, greatest, right?
Right.
Google was the thing before, but
Right.
really it just helps bring some clarity to some things. Really nice when I'm traveling down the road where I can just, punch it, ask a question, and it's talking to me, and I can ask another question. And again, as I'm going down the road, I'm kind of gathering information I need. I'm making notes. Google didn't
Gotcha.
work that good or that quick, and that the
Right.
Chat GPT program is a game changer.
Yeah. Let's see here. MOH says, I'm a remote keyboard warrior. They sold all our office space. They told us ain't going back to the office. All right. And then
Yeah.
learn so much from you and your guests. Ad lib, you know what? Thank you. Thanks, Bob, for coming on. Any relation to Tom? Exactly.
Well,
I should
usually
ask
when
that as a
I'm in a
question.
small town bar and I get asked that question, I usually get a free steak dinner, about 6 beers, and as I walk out the door, I say, "Not a truth to be said about that, don't even know the guy." No, not at this time, but I usually use it to my advantage. It's a great conversation piece, and we spell it
Right.
with an E, so we're spelling it the same.
Oh yeah.
And my wife hates it when somebody asks me that because usually I'm like, "Well, why don't you get me a beer and we'll talk about that."
That is awesome. That is awesome. All right. Then Clark says, great show tonight. Thanks, David and Bob. Well, got one more question. Before I let you go, what's one if you could give one piece of advice to someone buying raw land for the first time, what would it be? And I think I got an answer, but I want to hear what your answer is.
Well, first of all, call me, and I'm going to go to work for you like nobody else has gone to work for you. I enjoy it. I'm a full-time agent. I enjoy every piece of it. The other thing, it's a lot of fun.
Yep.
So we'll get started early. We'll have great conversations. And besides a client, you'll become a good friend. And
Awesome.
I'll look forward to meeting your friends and your family. And again, help everyone we can in the land space. But Yeah, give me a
Excellent.
call. Dave's got my number up, or send me an email at Bob Osborne, B Osborne at AmericanLegacyLandCo.com. But it'd
All
be my
right.
pleasure to meet any one of your guests and help them out in the land space.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Well, Bob, I really appreciate you being on tonight's program. And like I said, if anybody needs any help on the land side, um, be sure to give Bob a call or shoot him an email and that sort of thing. And then, but Bob, thank you very much for being on tonight. I really appreciate you having on as a guest.
Anytime, Dave. And again, I mean, everything I say, if anybody's got a question, please reach out. I'd be more than glad to help. But love your show. Glad I was on there, and look forward to next week.
Awesome. All right. Terrific. Well, Bob, thank you very much. I will say goodnight and we'll chat later. All right.
All right.
Oh, sorry about that. A little quick with the live stream there, but hey, Bud is in the house. Bud says, really good show tonight. Thank you, Bud. I appreciate that. And then sounds like one of those 20% guys. All right. That is awesome. Well, I tell you what, everybody, I really appreciate everybody stopping by and tonight. And then and again, if let me share this here. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the old like button and that sort of thing. We really appreciate that. And now next week, we won't have a show. I will be going to a conference. So we won't have a program next week, but we'll be back the following week. So I really appreciate that. And again, you guys all have a great night. Thanks again. Bye-bye.